All right, let's get started. All right, thank you all for joining this morning. We're studying Parsha Shelach. Again, page 798 in the Art Scroll, page 805 in the Steinsaltz Chumash. Parsha Shelach. I've always found Parsha Shelach to be a fun parsha. I know it's very sad and devastating, but it's so rich in detail and material for analysis. There's narrative, there's legal text, and the icing on the cake is that we have a second account of the events of Parsha Shelach. The sin of the spies is recounted by Moshe Rabbeinu in Devarim Perek Aleph with a number of important differences, which offers us so much to think about and so much to analyze and reflect on in trying to understand this story, a story which can be seen both as a very, very straightforward story and yet also a very complex story. To say the sin of the spies immediately conjures the basic narrative, and the basic narrative is that spies were dispatched to the land of Israel to scope it out, and they came back and gave a negative report, and the Jewish people believed the negative report. They accepted it, they mourned over it, and Hashem punished them for that. It's a very simple story to convey. But once you scratch beneath the surface and you look at the details, there's so much going on. This really is so rich with detail and nuance, which can be understood in different ways, and many different lessons can be derived from the story. So the story begins, Perek Yud Gimel in Sefer Bamidbar, Pasuk Aleph, Vaydaber Hashem Moshe Lemor. Already the first pasuk is controversial. Hashem speaks to Moshe saying, on its surface, there's nothing controversial about this at all. Vaydaber Hashem Moshe Lemor appears many times in the Torah. And yet, most of us know, all of us know, that when we turn to Sefer Dvarim, it's not so clear who initiated the command. Here it says Hashem commanded Moshe to send spies. But the way it's rendered in Sefer Dvarim, the way Moshe retells the story, it's totally different. Vatikruvun elai kulchem. You came to me. You, Bnei Yisrael, came to me, Moshe Rabbeinu, and asked to send spies. So the very first innocuous words, which appear all over the Torah, Vaydaber Hashem Moshe Lemor, are already controversial. Shlach lecha anashim, send for you, lecha, that very short, brief word lecha, to you, highlights the discussion of whose idea was this, and why were these spies being sent. Shlach lecha, send for you, for your purpose. Some people explain it. Or maybe Shlach lecha, it just means, you should send, but not necessarily because it's your desire. Shlach lecha anoshim, people, men, v'yasuru es eretz Canaan, and scout the land, v'yasuru. I refer to it as the sin of the spies. Everyone calls it the sin of the spies. But there are those who are particular to highlight that v'yasuru does not mean to spy necessarily. V'yasuru means to scout. And scouting is different than spying. What spying conveys something that is hidden and surreptitious, and it has a militaristic sense to it, an adversarial tone. V'yasuru, to scout, just means to gather information. And that information gathering could be for any reason. And it doesn't sound, to scout something isn't necessarily in secret. It isn't necessarily surreptitious. V'yasuru es eretz Canaan, asher ani nosein livnei Yisrael. So Hashem commands to send these scouts. Ish echad, l'matei avosav tishlachu kol nasivohem. Ish echad already sounds like a little bit poetic. That something very, very serious is going on here, that this isn't a mere instruction. Ish echad, one person, one man, for each tribe. You should send, each one shall be a nasi, a prince. And that's the instruction from Hashem to Moshe. And then just 2 psukim. And then Pasuk Gimel, Vaishlach osam Moshe. Moshe sends them. Mimi bar paran al pi Hashem. Al pi Hashem. By the word of Hashem. Kulam anashim rashi b'nei Yisrael hema. They were heads of the Bnei Yisrael as Hashem had commanded. Ve'elish mosam, and these are their names. L'matei Ruvain, Shamua ben Zakur, L'matei Shimon, Shafat ben Chori. Listing the names is something which begs the question, why? Why do we need to know their names? Who cares who their names are? Perhaps it has something to do with the fact that they are princes. But even if they're princes, why are their names, why are their identities so important? Okay, I understand. We need to be told that it was one person representing each tribe. But the fact that their names are given over seems to be conveying something, seems to be teaching us something. And then it has a wrap-up pasuk. We know these are the names. They've already told us. Ve'ela shmosam. But the fact that it would say ve'ela shmosam and eila shmoso anoshim shows that this is a unit of text that is supposed to convey a certain message. It's in there for a reason. It's supposed to stick out. And then Vayikra Moshe Moshe Binu Yoshua, and Moshe calls Moshe Binu Yehoshua, also very significant. And then in Pasuk Yud Zayin, turning the page, at least in the Steinsaltz, Vaishlach osam Moshe lasuras eretz Canaan, and he sends them to do exactly what Hashem said, which is to scout the land of Canaan. And these are the instructions. Now, the instructions weren't articulated by Hashem, but they are articulated by Moshe. And there are, I believe, 6 instructions about both the quality of the land and the quality of the inhabitants and their cities. And the questions lend themselves to analysis, right? The questions, we can look at the questions in order to try to understand why are we, what is Moshe looking for? What is this mission all about? The purpose of this mission can be gleaned, pun intended, the purpose of this mission can be gleaned from the instructions that Moshe gives to the spies or the scouts, right? Are they scouting the agriculture, or are they preparing for war? Are they preparing for battle? Are they checking out the land that Hashem is giving them, or are they preparing to learn more about its inhabitants, who they are going to have to encounter? And then we get a report of what they did, where they went, what they saw, what they brought back, and they come back and they deliver their report, and we know how things go. And if we were to go through the report, and I'm not going to read the report right now, but the report is given in 3 stages, as it were. They have an initial explanation. Then Kalev interrupts and he chimes in, and then they respond. And then the people start to react, and they respond even further. And so there's a lot to unpack in the way that they deliver their report and to whom they deliver their report. And this is just Parsha Shelach. You get to Parshas Devarim, Perek Aleph and Sefer Devarim, and you find a different rendering of the story, and you have to understand and answer, and figure out why there are these differences. So that's why I say this story is so rich, so ripe for analysis, and that's why I called it fun. Maybe fun was the wrong word to use, because again, this was a terribly tragic story, and in the view of Chazal, it generated a bechia l'shah that became a bechia l'doros. That the punishment, the crying that occurred that night, which was the 9th of Av, would be designated as a night in which we would cry for generations to come. So maybe I shouldn't call it fun, but it's certainly rich for analysis for those who enjoy engaging the text in this way. So what are we going to focus on? So what I'd like to focus on is at least an understanding of I guess the question that I'd like to approach the story with is, why are the people so severely punished? Which I know is kind of looking at the story backwards. there are plenty of questions we can ask at the front end, at the beginning of the story, but what's always captured my attention, and certainly this year as well, is why are the people so severely punished? So that seems to be a simple question. They're severely punished because Hashem made a bris, Hashem made a covenant with Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rachel, and Leah, to give them the land of Israel, and they were rejecting that part of the bris. Hashem took them out of Mitzrayim in order to bring them to this land, and they are saying no thank you. They are rejecting the gift that Hashem is giving them. It is a critical component of the bris, of the covenant, and so they are severely punished. Okay, that makes sense. But here's the but. The but for me is that who holds most of the responsibility for this? If they sent spies or scouts, right, the Marat Glim, if they sent spies who were the leaders of their tribes, and these leaders came back and gave a negative report, so I understand the harshest of punishment for the leaders, but shouldn't we have a little bit more mercy on this generation for the fact that they were induced to react negatively? I understand they Bnei Israel had a responsibility to hold on to their faith and not listen to the Marat Glim, but isn't that a mitigating factor? Isn't it a mitigating factor that they were responding to a report from sinful people? Yes, they should have understood. Yes, they should have rejected the report. But still, isn't it a mitigating factor that it's not that, when it comes to the Chet HaEgel, the sin of the golden calf, there you had a group of people who went about making a golden calf. They got Aaron on board, and they made a golden calf, and those people were punished. Those 3,000 people were executed, and they went on their way. But here you have a concerted group of people, the Marat Glim, who deliver this report, and it's based on that report that the people lose faith. Right? In the Chet HaEgel, they lost faith on their own. Right? Nobody induced them to lose faith. Right? They saw, right? The people as a collective, they saw that Moshe tarried and did not come down the mountain, and they lost faith. But here there was a group of people that made them lose their faith. So clearly they were punished more severely. Those 10 people were killed immediately, and the rest of the generation died out before they reached the land. But why isn't that more of a mitigating factor? That's what's always bothered me, at least part of what's bothered me about this story, and that's my point of entry to an analysis of this story. And I'd like to go over some of the more commonly discussed issues of how this mission develops, that the Rishonim and later authorities bring up in order to answer this question. Why are the Jewish people so severely punished when there's clearly a mitigating factor? They were misled. They were induced. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to do is show you some of the differences that the rabbis, that Chazal, that the Rishonim have pointed out when it comes to the differences between the story as it's rendered here in Shelach and as it's presented in Sefer Devarim by Moshe Rabbeinu. So we read through a little bit of the story here in Parsha Shelach. Let's flip over to Devarim Perek Aleph for a moment, and I'll give you the page numbers when I get there. Vatikrivun Elai. Perek Aleph Pasuk Chav Beis in Devarim, which is page 951 in the Steinsaltz. And in the art scroll, Perek Aleph, Pasuk Chav Beis in Devarim is on page 944. Vatikruvun Elai Kulchem Vatomru, you drew near, right? You drew near, you came close, you approached me, Moshe, Kulchem, all of you, Kulchem, all of you, Vatomru, and you said, Nishlecha Anashim Lufanenu v'yachberu lanu es haaretz, right? Let us send men before us, and let us, Yachberu, spy out the land, v'yashivu osanu davar es haderech asher na'levav es harim asher navo aleihem. And these spies will bring back to us the way in which we should go into the land and the cities that we will come upon. Vayitav be'enai hadavar. And this was good in my eyes. Me, Moshe. I thought this was a good idea. Va'ekach mikem shneim asar anashim ish echad lashavet. And I took 12 people, one man per tribe. Vayifnu, vayalu hahara, vayavo ad nachal eshkol, vayiraglu osa. And they went up the mountain, and they spied out. Right? Vayikhu biyadam mipri haaretz, and they brought it, and they said that the land is a good land. I'm skipping now. Pasuk Chaf Vav, verse 26. V'lo avisem la'alos. But you did not want to go up. You know what? I shouldn't skip Pasuk Chafei. I'm sorry. Pasuk Chafei. Vayikhu biyadam mipri haaretz, vayiridu olon elenu. Right? They brought the fruits and they brought them down to us. V'yashivu osanu davar v'yomru tova haaretz. And they said the land was good. Asher Hashem Elokeinu nosein lanu. Right? That Hashem is giving us. V'lo avisem la'alos. And you did not want to go up. You, Bnei Israel, did not want to go up. Vatomru espi Hashem Elokeichem. And you rebelled against the word of Hashem. Vateiragnu bo'alechem vatomru. Vateiragnu is a powerful word. Vateiragnu, Steinsaltz translates it as you murmured at your tents, right? You spoke about it. You chatted about it. Vatomru b'sinas Hashem osan, and you said it's because of Hashem's hatred for us that He took us out of Mitzrayim. Hotzionu mi'eretz Mitzrayim l'aseh osanu b'yad ha'emori la'ashmidenu. And then it develops from there. And so what's fascinating about this account, what stands out most, first of all, is whose idea was this? Who was motivated to have this spy mission, as opposed, as it's rendered here in Dvarim, as opposed to a Sefer Bamidbar, and what was the role of these spies in participating in this terrible thing? Because Moshe, in this account, shifts some of the primary focuses of Sefer Bamidbar to other parties. And what I mean by that is, in Parsha Shelach, in Bamidbar, it was Hashem who initiated this mission. In Devarim, it's the people. It's the people, and it was Moshe who approved. Not even it was the people's idea, and Hashem approved and said, Shlach lecha, which is what some commentaries say. Some commentaries want to blend these two stories together, and it's totally legitimate, and say that, yes, the Jewish people approached, Hashem said, Shlach lecha, and Moshe sent them. But let's leave the story separate for a second. In Parsha Shelach, Hashem commands, and Moshe fulfills his commandment. In Sefer Devarim, Parshas Devarim, right? It's the Jewish people who have the idea, and Moshe, in his own eyes, of his own volition, approves. So that's one major shift in focus. Here's another major shift in focus, and this one is one of the most startling. And that is, in Parsha Shelach, the spies deliver a negative report. The spies say, we cannot defeat the people in Canaan. The spies have very clear responsibility in Parsha Shelach. In Parshas Devarim, all it says about the spies is that they said it was a good land that Hashem is giving us. The spies in Moshe's retelling get off scot-free. We call this the sin of the spies, the Chet Marat Glim. Right? They speak 3 times in Parsha Shelach. And in Parshas Devarim, they speak once, and it's all good. Tova ha'aretz asher Hashem Elokeinu nosein lanu. V'lo avisem lalos, and you, Bnei Yisrael, all on your own, decided you're not going up. What an enormous shift in perspective. This second shift, and I'll summarize them when I'm done. The shift in perspective from the sin started with the spies and then the Jewish people went along to, in this account, spies did nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. It's startling when you think about it. I'm sure I'm not telling you anything new. I'm sure you've seen this before, but it's so startling when you review it that the entire sin is placed on Bnei Yisrael from beginning to end. Batik Ravun, it was your idea. You came to me, and you decided you're not going up. And then the last shift I'd like to point out is that when it comes to the nature of the mission, because in Parsha Shelach and Sefer Bamidbar, this was a scouting mission with a variety of questions to answer. Some of them could have been military and strategic, but some of them were agricultural. And there's a broad description of what their mission was and how they carried out the mission. In this rendering in Sefer Devarim, it's very obviously it's a much shorter account. It's a review. It's a reflection. So it's a much shorter account, but it says, it says just very simply, v'yachberu lanu es haaretz. They're going to go to spy out the land. They're going to spy the land, and they're going to figure out how we should go in, which just seems to be a purely strategic. I'm sorry, there's one other focus that shifted. So there's going to be 4 in total, and I'll summarize them. Just making a note for myself. And that is who was sent. Because remember, I emphasized how much the Torah in Parsha Shelach describes at length who was being sent. It was not just a one person per shevet, but it was a prince. It was the nasi. It was the leader of the shevet, and they were listed by names. In Devarim, I understand we don't have the names. We're not giving a whole review, but it doesn't even identify them as nasiim. They're anonymous both in name and in title. Va'ekach mikem, I took from you. Moshe says, I took from you 12 men, ish echad lashevet. Lashavet, 1 man per shevet. Doesn't say that they were nasiim. So that shift in focus, like the second one that I mentioned, really turns our attention away from the spies. Right? In the first account, it's all about the spies and who they were. And in this account, not only is it not so much about the spies, but we don't even know who they are in this account. And it doesn't focus on their names or their titles, their standing, their stature as Nasiim. So there are 4 major shifts in focus. I mean, there are different ways you can contrast these 2 stories, right? You can focus on the language, you can focus on the elements. What I'm doing is a little bit different. It's definitely based on the language and the elements of the story, but to me, I'm already casting it as a shift in focus. Not just differences in the language, but a shift in focus, right? So first of all, the shift in focus is on who's responsible. I'm sorry, on whose idea. Second one is who's responsible. The third shift in focus is the mission goal or objective. And finally, the identity of spies, or scouts. And I'll review those. Right, the four shifts in focus. Right, the focus in Shelach is the focus is on Hashem delivering a commandment that they carry out. But the here in Devarim, it's the focus is shifted all the way towards Bnei Israel. In Shelach, it's who's responsible for the sin. It's the spies and the people. Whereas in Devarim, it's only the people. In Shelach, the focus of the mission is a variety of issues. The focus in Devarim is on one issue, and that is strategic. And finally, the focus in Shelach is on the identities and the standing, the status of the people who went. And in Devarim, the focus is totally shifted towards Bnei Israel again. We don't even know their names. We don't even know their titles in Devarim. So all of the Rishonim deal with these issues in different ways. And I think the most relatable approach is to say that Moshe is giving deeper insight into a story, that we learn whatever we learn from the story in Shelach, and we learn further lessons in Devarim as Moshe reflects on that episode in order to teach lessons. Because again, remember, Sefer Devarim is Moshe's soliloquy, more or less. It's Moshe's soliloquy in which he is preparing the Jewish people for entering the land of Israel, explaining to them how we got where we got. Right, we took a 40-year detour because of this terrible episode. And preparing them, right, religiously and theologically, preparing them. And in order to do so, they have to reflect on their experiences and learn the appropriate lessons from those experiences. So that's kind of the most general relatable approach. But what I'd like to discuss in part, not completely, but in part, is the approach of Rabbi Yaakov Meidan, because Rabbi Yaakov Meidan has a brilliant, nuanced, and novel approach to this story, and he makes several observations which are just brilliant and I really believe unprecedented. And I'm not going to capture everything he says. He wrote a long article, a long treatment of this, but I do want to capture certain elements of what he taught because they're very, very instructive, and they really provide a lot to discuss. And so one of the first observations that Rav Meidan provides is that Moshe being told in Bamidbar, Shlach lecha anoshim v'yasuru es eretz Canaan, it clearly says that Hashem commands him, is really, it's kind of an obvious observation, but this is the next stage in Jewish history, right? So Hashem turns to Moshe and says, okay, now let's embark on the next stage of the bris, of the covenant. And so what Rav Meidan does brilliantly is he compares it to the last time that Hashem did that, right? That when Hashem turns to Moshe in order to do something, right? There's a couple projects along the way, right? Hashem appears to Moshe at the burning bush and says, "Go back to Mitzrayim," right? And then they take the people out of Mitzrayim. They end up at the Yam Suf, and Hashem turns to Moshe and says, "Tell them to just travel." Then they get to Har Sinai, and Hashem says to Moshe, "Come up to the mountain and receive the Torah." And now this is the next stage. So the Shlach lecha anoshim, the Vayidaber Hashem Moshe limor Shlach lecha anoshim, it reflects the fact that Hashem is now moving on to the next stage in Jewish history. And what's fascinating, this is the most brilliant observation, and that is that if Hashem told Moshe to send spies, right, to do something, and that something turned into a 40-day mission, what does that remind you of? It reminds you of Ma'amad Har Sinai, right? Hashem summons Moshe to leave the Jewish people and go up the mountain in order to get the Torah. He's there for 40 days and 40 nights, and then he comes back. And the next event is also go somewhere for 40 days. Hashem doesn't say it's 40 days. It turns out to be 40 days. And then come back. And so Rav Meidan makes this fascinating parallel between Maimon Har Sinai and the sending of the spies, which conveys the sense that sending spies isn't necessarily a problematic thing if it was done according to the way that Hashem wanted it to be done, right? The way Hashem wanted it to be done was the same way as Maimon Har Sinai. Maimon Har Sinai was in order to achieve a certain goal, a certain stage in the bris and the covenant. Same thing with Shelach. Shelach was supposed to be the next thing after Maimon Har Sinai. So what happens in both? They both result in a sin. They both result in a sin that threatens the very existence of the Jewish people. Moshe goes up on Har Sinai, 40 days, he comes back down, Hashem wants to destroy the entire Jewish people, Cheta Ego. The Marat Glim, they go into the land of Israel, they bring stuff back, they come back after 40 days, Hashem wants to destroy the Jewish people. These are critical transition moments in which we see the vulnerability and the struggle of the Jewish people. I don't want to focus on the vulnerability and the struggle, but I just want you to see that parallel, right? Going up the mountain, going into the land of Israel, being there for 40 days, coming back, existential sin. And Rav Meidan notices this parallel. He adds more elements into this parallel. He also adds the fact that before you get to that stage, you have the Korban Pesach, right? They do the Korban Pesach in Mitzrayim, and then they get the Torah. They do the Korban Pesach in the second year, and then they're sent to go check out the land of Israel. In each instance, there's a description of the Amud, of the pillar of smoke, of cloud and fire, which represents Hashem's presence in each one. In each instance, you have the arrival of Yisro. You have a mention of Yisro, right? Yisro before Matan Torah, Yisro before leaving to go to land of Israel. I'm not going to get into all those elements, but it's a fascinating series of observations that Rav Meidan makes, and the argument is that as important as it was for Moshe to go up to get the Torah, it was important for Marat Glim to go into the land of Israel. But what were the Marat Glim supposed to go into the land of Israel for? So this is the other observation of Rav Meidan. Again, I'm not going to go through all the details of it because we'd get a little bogged down. But what Rav Meidan argues is that this mission was a scouting mission, not a spying mission, right? It says v'yasuru in Parsha Shelach. It was a scouting mission, but it was a scouting mission in order to promote or to foster the settlement of the land of Israel. And that's why you have one man from each tribe. You have one man, you have a Nasi from each tribe in order to begin the process of settling the land of Israel, right? They're going to do, right? Whenever you buy a house, you need an inspection, right? So they were going to take possession. Part of taking possession of the land of Israel was sending these scouts ahead, and they were Nasiim. They were each one from each tribe, because each tribe is going to each have its Nachala. And Rav Meidan discusses about how it seems that, for the most part, everyone knew where their Nachala was going to be. There were elements of each one's portion already in the brachos to the brothers in Parshas Vayechi that Yaakov gives to the sons in Parshas Vayechi. We already know, by the time Parsha Shelach happens, we already know Levi's not getting a chelek. We already know certain things. We already know that Zevulun is going to be by the sea, right? There are a number of things that we already know. So the mission wasn't so much practically necessary as it was fundamentally necessary. The mission is part. I don't know if Rav Meidan says this clearly as I do, but what I'm saying is that this mission was about taking possession of the land of Israel, not conquering, just taking possession, beginning the process of fulfilling that part of the bris, that part of the covenant that Hashem would give us this land. And so sending one person from each tribe was supposed to represent the beginning stages of each tribe taking a portion. And so that's why the word v'yasuru is used in Parsha Shelach, not vayachberu as in Parshas Bamidbar, because it was just for scouting. It was just for the beginning, and all the focus on the agricultural contours and features and the cities and the people was meant in that vein. That this was the land they were going to take possession of, and the princes were the first ones who were going to begin that process. And that's why we get all their names, because this is such an important stage in history. Just like Moshe was summoned to come up to Har Sinai to get the Torah, these 12 men were summoned to go to the land of Israel to take possession of the land of Israel, or begin to take possession of the land of Israel. And each one of these important stages is fraught with danger and spiritual danger. And in both of those instances, Ma'amad Har Sinai and taking possession of the land, weaknesses were exposed. Weaknesses were exposed for us to learn from. Okay, but continuing further, Rav Meidan also talks about how, when Moshe in Sefer Dvarim describes Matan Torah, he talks about how the Jewish people recoiled in fear. They recoiled in fear from the fire on Har Sinai, from hearing the voice. And so he sees a parallel also, the response of fear at Ma'amad Har Sinai and the response of fear to the report of the spies. So these are some of the parallels, the very fascinating, creative, brilliant parallels that Rav Meidan draws between sending the spies and Ma'amad Har Sinai. And it's so fascinating to me. So the problem is, what went wrong, and why do we have a shift in focus in Sefer Dvarim? And if we answer those two questions, we'll answer my first question all the way at the top of the shir of why the Jewish people are so severely punished when it was really the spies who enabled them. So what went wrong? What went wrong was that fear, the uncertainty and the unknown of that transition into a life in the land of Israel allowed them to, or motivated them to take this mission, which Hashem had one idea for, and add another layer, add their own layer. They added their own elements to this mission. That what was supposed to be a triumphant, official, regal mission of sending princes also turned into kicking the tires around the car that Hashem is generously offering us. Looking a gift horse in the mouth. It's not just about that, but I'm being cute a little bit. But what goes wrong, and it's hard to see that in Parsha Shelach, because the focus in Parsha Shelach is trying to convey a certain Ma'amad Har Sinai experience that went wrong. And so it's hard to see the Jewish people influencing this mission in the wrong way, because that's not the focus of this story. The focus of this story is, this is an important moment in the transition of the bris, in transition to the next stage of the bris. And it's like Hashem wants to protect that concept. Hashem wants to protect that concept that even though it went wrong, it's still a very, very important moment. Right? Ma'amad Har Sinai is still Ma'amad Har Sinai, even though we have Chet HaEgel. Right? We still celebrate the moment of the giving of the Torah, even though the sin of the golden calf happened. The same thing here. The reason why Parsha Shelach has a focus on the princes and the instructions and Hashem's command is because this is an important, positive moment in the story of the Jewish people, the moment in which they are now ready to take possession of the land of Israel. And no matter what happens in the aftermath, no matter what the Chet Marat Glim, this is still an important moment. After 40 years, after the punishment is completed, and Moshe is now speaking to the next generation, the second generation, Moshe highlights just what went wrong. because he's preparing this people for that moment. And so Moshe shifts the focus, obviously divinely inspired, right? The Torah all comes from Hashem. But through Moshe, Hashem shifts the focus from Parsha Shelach into Parshas Devarim, shifts the focus onto the people. Because the people's fear played a role in derailing this mission. The people's fear, their lack of trust, their lack of faith, for whatever reason, is what drove this mission to go sideways. And so I just want to turn back to Parshas Devarim again one more time. Maybe some of you are still there in your Chumashim. Page 951 in the Steinsaltz, and 944 in the Art Scroll. But Vatikruvun Elai, right? You guys came to me. Vatomrun yishlachol lefanenu v'yachberu lanu. We want them to spy, right? Even though Hashem commanded a mission, they put their own initiative into this mission. And we want them not just to scout, we want them not just to begin to take possession of the land, each person per tribe, but no, we want to do something that has nothing to do with the tribes, has nothing to do with the settlement of the land, the dividing up of the land. We want to be reassured. We're not so sure. We're nervous. We want reassurance that what Hashem is giving us is, is something that we want, or is good, or is obtainable. And from that perspective, spies did nothing wrong. From that perspective, the spies did nothing wrong. Even though in Parsha Shelach, the focus is on their responsibility, but with regards to what Bnei Israel contributed, they're responsible all on their own. And so Moshe leaves out the sin of the spies. And all he focuses on is the fact that the spies did some of their mission. They scouted. They told you this was a good land that Hashem is giving you. The lo avisem la'alos. You on your own, you went with your fear. You let your fear dictate how you reacted to the spies. The lo avisem la'alos. You did not desire to go up. The spies, they made their own mistakes. You can look at Parsha Shelach for their mistakes. But in Sefer Devarim, Moshe wants Bnei Israel to own their own mistakes. And their own mistakes, obviously the previous generation, but we have to bear the entire history of our people. They, of their own volition, changed their desire to not go up. Vatamru espi Hashem Elokechem, and they rebelled. And so what we have with these two stories, the way Rav Meidan teaches them to us, what we have here is a very sophisticated, nuanced shift of focus. In Shelach, the focus is kibush haaretz, taking possession of the land that Hashem gave us and how that got derailed. In Parshas Devarim, the focus is on what did Bnei Israel do to derail that program? As a people, as a collective. And as a collective, we succumbed to our fears. We did not summon the faith. And we, as a collective, made a conscious choice not to go into the land of Israel. And it's exactly what you have here. And when you think about that comparison that Rav Meidan made between Maimon Har Sinai and the Marat Glim, it becomes very clear. It becomes very clear that in the wake of Maimon Har Sinai, the Jewish people succumbed to certain vulnerabilities, theological vulnerabilities that led them to make the golden calf. But nevertheless, Maimon Har Sinai is Maimon Har Sinai. Same thing with Chet Marat Glim. I wish there was a name for this story that didn't focus on the sin, right? We don't call Maimon Har Sinai Chet Egel, right? But we call this story Chet Marat Glim. But I think that misses the point a little bit, right? this is a story of in Parsha Shelach, it's a story of kibush haaretz. In Parsha Shelach, it's a story of the fulfillment of the bris, of Hashem making good on his promise. It turned into a sin, and because it was so fundamental, it became a very defining sin, unfortunately. But that's why we refer to the story as Chet Marat Glim. But it needs a new name, I think. I think Chet Marat Glim needs a new name. I think it needs a name like Maimed Har Sinai, Kibush Haaretz. Haschalas Kibush Haaretz, the beginning of the taking possession of the land. And it led into Chet Marat Glim, just like it led into Chet Egel. So why were the Jewish people punished so severely? They were punished so severely because they, of their own volition, got involved in a mission initiated by Hashem, and they initiated their own part of the mission. And by initiating their own part of their mission, they succumbed to their own fears and their own doubts and their own weakness of faith. And therefore, they're responsible for everything that happened afterwards. If the spies came back, if the Marat Glim, the scouts, whatever you want to call them, if they come back and they report things that you can't hear, and if they report things in the wrong way, still your fault. It's their fault too, but it's your fault also, Bnei Israel, because you enabled the spies to play on your fears. You enabled them to, you gave them license to manipulate yourselves. And so there's plenty of responsibility to give out. And there's a whole discussion about Moshe's role in all of this. Because in Sefer Bamidbar, Moshe is denied entry into the land because he hit the rock. But Moshe implies in Devarim that he didn't go into the land because of the sin of the spies, which makes a lot of sense, because everyone else who was denied entry was denied because of the sin of the spies. But it highlights the fact that Moshe recognizes his own failings in this entire episode and what he could have done differently, perhaps, in order to stave off such a devastating result. So this is why this story is so rich. Even the analysis that I'm presenting to you here is really just one of many perspectives we could take. And there's many more questions. And the questions that I ask could be answered in different ways, which is why Parsha Shelach is such a rich and rewarding story for studying Chumash. All right, thank you all for joining today. It's good to see you. We're still going to be on Zoom for the time being, even though we've started minyanim and stuff. So, but I'm glad everyone could make it. Have a great week, everybody. Take care.